Um, my name is Camilla, and I just turned 36 last month. 1 week ago, I buried my 9-year-old son, Jason, the light of my life, completely alone. While I watched his small coffin lower into the ground, my parents and sister were celebrating at a pre-wedding party across town. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. "We need that trust money for the wedding. Stop being selfish," I whispered. "I understand." But they had no idea what was coming next. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from today? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members who only remember you when they need something. I never had the perfect family growing up. My parents, Margaret and Thomas, always made it clear that my younger sister Tiffany was their priority. While Tiffany got new clothes and extravagant birthday parties, I received hand-me-downs and simple celebrations, if they remembered at all. There was nothing particularly wrong with me. I got good grades, stayed out of trouble, and tried my best to make them proud. But somehow, it was never enough. By 16, I had accepted my place in the family hierarchy and focused on building my own future. I worked part-time jobs, saved every penny, and dreamed of the day I could leave home. When I earned a partial scholarship to State University, my parents barely acknowledged it. Tiffany was in the middle of her dance competition season, which consumed all their attention and financial resources. I took out student loans to cover the rest and moved into my dorm without their help. College was where I truly bloomed. Away from my family's shadow, I discovered my talent for numbers and finance. I made real friends who valued me for who I was. And during my sophomore year, I met Andrew in my economics class. He was charming, ambitious, and most importantly, he saw me. Our relationship progressed quickly. By senior year, we were engaged, and I thought I had finally found my own family. We married right after graduation. Andrew landed a job at a marketing firm, while I started at a financial planning company. We were young and in love, figuring out adult life together. When I discovered I was pregnant after our first anniversary, it was unexpected, but welcome news. Andrew seemed excited too, though looking back, I now recognize the flickers of panic in his eyes. Jason came into our world on a rainy April morning. The moment they placed him in my arms, I experienced a love so powerful, it took my breath away. This tiny human with his father eyes and my dark curls became my entire world. For the first time in my life, I understood what unconditional love felt like. Andrew tried to be a good father, but parenthood changed our relationship. The sleepless nights, financial pressures, and new responsibilities created tension. When Jason was diagnosed with mild asthma as a toddler, Andrew started spending more time at work and less time at home. I told myself he was just trying to secure our future, to ensure we could afford any medical care Jason might need. Then one day when Jason was just 3, I came home from grocery shopping to find Andrew bags packed. I can tell you the exact words he said because they branded themselves into my memory. "I never wanted this, Camilla. I am not cut out to be a father, especially to a sick kid. The life insurance policy is paid up. That will have to be enough." He walked out the door and we never saw him again. The divorce papers arrived by courier a week later, along with a signed document relinquishing all parental rights. Just like that, we were on our own. I called my parents hoping for some support during this crisis. My mother listened impatiently before informing me that Tiffany had just been accepted to a prestigious dance academy in New York and they were busy planning her move. They could maybe send a little money at Christmas, but that was all they could offer. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes, so I did what I had always done. I pulled myself together and figured it out alone. I threw myself into my career, working extra hours while finding reliable childcare for Jason. I moved us to a smaller apartment to save money. Every decision I made was with one goal in mind: giving my son the best life possible. As for Jason, he was the most remarkable child. Despite his early asthma issues, he was full of energy and curiosity. He loved dinosaurs and space. He could name all the planets and their moons by the time he was 5. His kindergarten teacher called him an old soul wise beyond his years. He rarely complained about his father's absence or his limited contact with my side of the family. We created our own traditions. Saturday mornings were for pancakes shaped like whatever he was interested in that week. Sundays were for adventures. Sometimes big ones like the zoo or science museum. Sometimes small ones like exploring a new park or library. We read together every night before bed, working our way through Harry Potter and Percy Jackson as he got older. Contact with my family dwindled to obligatory holiday calls. My parents remembered Jason's birthday about half the time, usually with a generic card containing a $20 bill. Tiffany, now pursuing her dance career in New York, never acknowledged him at all. It hurt, but Jason and I had each other, and that seemed enough. When Jason was 7, he started having occasional nosebleeds. The pediatrician wasn't concerned attributing them to dry air and seasonal allergies. Then he began complaining about feeling tired after school. Again, the doctor suggested it was normal growth, and perhaps a need for an earlier bedtime. I adjusted our routines and made sure he was getting proper nutrition and rest. The bruises started appearing when he was 8, small ones at first which he couldn't explain. I know kids get bumps and bruises from playing, but something felt wrong. When a large purple bruise appeared on his arm after a minor bump against a door frame, I insisted on blood tests. 2 days later, the pediatrician called and asked us to come in immediately. I knew before she said the words. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, an aggressive form. My world collapsed around me as she explained treatment options and referred us to an oncologist at Children's Memorial Hospital. That night, after Jason had fallen asleep, I sat on my bathroom floor and sobbed silently into a towel. I allowed myself exactly 30 minutes of complete breakdown before pulling myself together. Jason needed me to be strong, and I would not let him down. The next day, I set up a trust fund with a combination of Andrew life insurance money that I had carefully invested plus my own savings. It was meant to secure Jason's future to pay for college someday, or medical expenses if his condition persisted. I never imagined it would become the source of such betrayal. I reached out to my family again after the diagnosis, hoping that the seriousness of the situation might finally bring us together. They seemed appropriately concerned during the initial phone call. My mother even cried and promised they would be there for us. I allowed myself to hope briefly that Jason's illness might bridge the gap in our fractured family. That hope faded quickly. My parents visited once at the hospital during Jason's first round of chemotherapy. They stayed less than an hour, clearly uncomfortable with the medical setting. Tiffany sent a generic get well card with her signature scrawled at the bottom. Then 2 weeks later, my mother called with exciting news. Tiffany was engaged to Bradley, the son of a wealthy real estate developer. The wedding planning would consume the next year, and they were all thrilled. Just like that, my son Cancer became secondary to my sister's wedding plans. Every subsequent call included minimal questions about Jason, before pivoting to extensive details about wedding venues, dress fittings, and flower arrangements. It was as if they lived in a parallel universe, where a child fighting for his life was less important than choosing between ivory and eggshell napkins. Meanwhile, Jason's treatment was brutal. The chemotherapy ravaged his small body. His beautiful dark curls fell out. He lost weight and developed mouth sores that made eating painful. There were fevers, infections, blood transfusions, and countless nights in the hospital. Through it all, he maintained a courage that humbled me. On his better days, he would comfort me telling jokes or making up stories about the space adventures he would have when he got better. I took family medical leave, but eventually had to return to work part-time to maintain our health insurance. My employers were understanding, allowing me flexible hours and remote work when possible. My neighbors organized a meal train. Jason teachers arranged for home tutoring and made sure his classmates sent cards and video messages. These strangers showed more genuine concern than my own family. During a brief period of remission, we celebrated with a small party at home. Jason requested a space-themed cake, and his face lit up when he saw the detailed solar system design. I sent photos to my parents, who responded with a quick, "Great," before launching into details about Tiffany's engagement party the following weekend. They didn't ask if we could attend. They knew we couldn't. When Jason relapsed 3 months later, the doctors recommended a more aggressive treatment protocol. The side effects were worse, but he faced them with the same quiet determination. By this point, I was running on autopilot balancing work, hospital visits, medication schedules, and trying to give Jason some semblance of normalcy when he felt well enough. My family check ins became increasingly rare, and when they did call, the conversation inevitably turned to Tiffany wedding. 6 months before the planned date, my mother called to inform me that I was expected to be a bridesmaid. I explained that given Jason's condition, I couldn't commit to being in the wedding party, or even attending at all. What followed was a tirade about family obligations and how I was being selfish. How could I ruin Tiffany's special day? Couldn't I find someone to watch Jason for a weekend? My mother's words felt like physical blows. I hung up and blocked her number for a week, the first time I had ever stood up to her, even in this small way. Despite the grim prognosis, Jason and I created a modest bucket list. We watched all the Star Wars movies in order. We built an elaborate Lego space station. On his good days, we visited the planetarium and the Natural History Museum. He got to meet a real astronaut through a program for seriously ill children. These small joys punctuated the increasingly difficult days. When Jason was admitted to the hospital for what would be the final time, the doctor spoke to me gently but honestly. The cancer had spread despite all interventions. Treatment options were exhausted. They recommended focusing on quality of life and comfort care. I listened numbly, nodding at appropriate intervals, while feeling like I was floating outside my body. The decision to bring Jason home for hospice care was the hardest and yet easiest choice I ever made. Hard because it meant accepting the inevitable, easy because I knew it was what Jason wanted. He had grown weary of the hospital with its constant beeping machines and revolving door of medical staff. Our living room transformed into a comfortable care space. The hospice team set up a hospital bed near the window, where Jason could see the sky. They showed me how to administer his pain medication and what signs to watch for as his condition progressed. They spoke about his comfort with compassion, but didn't sugarcoat what was coming. Jason, despite being only 9, seemed to understand more than I wanted him to. One evening, as I was reading him The Hobbit, he interrupted to ask, "I am not getting better, am I, Mom?" The question knocked the air from my lungs, but I had always promised to be honest with him. "No, sweetheart, the doctors have tried everything. I am so sorry." He nodded thoughtfully. "I thought so. It doesn't hurt as much anymore, but I feel different, weaker." I held his hand, memorizing the feel of his small fingers intertwined with mine, fighting back tears. "It okay, Mom. I am not scared. I just worry about you. You will be all alone." In that moment, my dying child was comforting me, showing a wisdom and empathy that many adults never achieve. I assured him I would be okay, even though I couldn't imagine how. Over the next few days, we had several meaningful conversations that I now treasure. Jason asked questions about what might happen after death. He wondered if he would see his grandfather, my father, who had passed before Jason was born. He wanted to know if I thought stars were really the souls of people who had died, something he had read in one of his books. I called my parents to let them know that Jason had been moved to hospice care. My mother's answer was distracted. "Oh, that bad. Listen, we are in the middle of Tiffany final dress fitting. Can I call you back?" She never did. Instead, Tiffany texted later that day. "Sorry about Jason. Hope he feels better soon. BTW, did Mom tell you the wedding has been upgraded to the Grand Plaza Hotel?" So excited. The disconnect between their reality and mine was so vast it felt almost comical. While my child was dying, they were debating the merits of a chocolate fountain at a wedding reception. Jason's condition deteriorated rapidly. The hospice nurse explained this was common with children. They often decline quickly once the fight is over. I read him his favorite books, played his favorite music, and streamed Planet's documentary that he loved. We watched the sunset together each evening from his bed by the window. One clear night, as we gazed at the stars, Jason squeezed my hand weakly. "Mom, you know my trust fund, the one you set up for college." "Yes, sweetie. I don't think I will need it," he whispered. When I am gone, I want you to use some of it to do something that makes you happy. Promise. I promised through my tears, though happiness seemed an impossible concept. The next day, Jason asked to speak with the hospice social worker privately. I was surprised, but respected his wish. Their conversation lasted about 15 minutes. Afterward, the social worker gave me a gentle smile, but didn't share their discussion. That night, Jason slipped away peacefully while I held him. One moment he was there, his shallow breaths marking time, and the next he was gone. No dramatic final words, no cinematic last gasp, just a gentle transition from being to non-being, as natural and as devastating as a star blinking out. The silence that followed was deafening. I held his body for hours, unable to let go, unable to accept that my beautiful, brilliant boy was truly gone. The hospice nurse arrived at dawn, gently helping me through those first terrible hours. She called the funeral home while I sat numb and shattered. I moved through the following days in a fog. The funeral director was kind, helping me select a small casket. Simple but dignified, as I thought Jason would want. I chose readings and music for the service. I ordered flowers with planets and stars woven among them. I wrote a eulogy I wasn't sure I could deliver. I called my family to inform them of Jason passing and the funeral arrangements. My mother sighed heavily before responding. "Oh, Camila, this timing is so difficult. Tiffany has her bridal shower that day, and we have guests coming from out of town. Could you possibly reschedule?" I felt nothing as I replied, "No, Mom, I cannot reschedule my son's funeral to accommodate a bridal shower. The service is at 2 on Saturday. I hope you can make it." She promised to see what they could do, her tone suggesting I was being unreasonable. I ended the call and continued making arrangements, too numb to even feel angry. The morning of the funeral, I received a text from my mother, emergency, with Tiffany dress fitting. "Can't make funeral. So sorry. Send pictures, send pictures." Of my son funeral, as if it were a school play or soccer game. Something inside me cracked, but I had no time to fall apart. I had to get through this day for Jason. I arrived at the small chapel alone, greeting the funeral director, who gave my arm a sympathetic squeeze. To my surprise, Jason's third-grade teacher was there, along with several of his classmates and their parents. His oncologist and 2 nurses from the pediatric ward arrived. Neighbors and a few colleagues from work filled several rows. These people, many of whom were practically strangers, showed up while my own family did not. I somehow made it through the service. I read the eulogy, sharing stories of Jason's courage, his curiosity, his compassion for others, even while suffering himself. I spoke of his love for the stars, and how I would always look for him in the night sky. There wasn't a dry eye in the chapel, including my own. After the burial, several people came back to my house bringing food and offering comfort. They shared memories of Jason that made me both laugh and cry. As the last guests were leaving, my phone pinged with a notification. A mutual friend had tagged me in photos from Tiffany bridal shower. The timestamp showed it had occurred during Jason's funeral, but it wasn't a dress-fitting emergency at all. The photos showed my parents and sister laughing, raising champagne glasses in a decorated hotel ballroom. Tiffany wore a white sash proclaiming bride-to-be, as my mother helped her unwrap expensive gifts. They were partying while I buried my son. I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by sympathy cards and funeral flowers, staring at those images, until my phone battery died. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that it transcended pain and landed somewhere beyond emotion. I felt hollow, emptied of everything except a strange, calm clarity. Later that night, my phone rang. It was my mother, her words slurred from what was clearly too much champagne. The shower was wonderful, but Bradley's parents are being so stingy about the wedding budget. "We need at least another $50,000 for the venue Tiffany has her heart set on." I was thinking about Jason's college fund. He obviously won't be needing it now, and it would really help the family out. I listened in disbelief as she continued rambling about wedding expenses, not once expressing sympathy for my loss or asking how I was coping. When she finally paused for breath, I simply said, I can't talk about this right now, and hung up. I curled up in Jason's bed that night, clutching his favorite stuffed astronaut toy, and finally allowed myself to shatter completely. The next morning, my phone rang at 8 a.m. sharp. My mother's voice came through crisp and businesslike, as if our conversation the previous night had never happened. Camilla, we need to discuss Jason Trust Fund. The wedding is in 3 months, and we need to finalize payments to vendors. I remained silent, still processing the audacity of her request. We need that trust money for the wedding. Stop being selfish. There is no reason for you to keep it now. Tiffany deserves a beautiful wedding, and that money could make it happen. I swallowed hard before responding quietly. I understand. I'll need to check with the trustee about the process. My mother exhaled with relief. Good. We were worried you would be difficult about this. We will come by this afternoon to discuss the details. Before I could object, she hung up. I sat motionless, phone in hand, as a strange calm settled over me. They had mistaken my quiet response for acquiescence, not realizing I had simply said I understood their request, not that I agreed to it. True to her word, my mother arrived that afternoon with my father and Tiffany in tow. They entered my home without acknowledging the sympathy flowers or cards still displayed. No one mentioned Jason or offered condolences. Instead, they made themselves comfortable in my living room, as if this were a normal family visit. So Tiffany began twisting her massive engagement ring. We were thinking the trust fund could cover the venue upgrade to the Grand Plaza Ballroom, the premium open bar package, and our honeymoon to Bali. That should take care of most of it, right? I noticed my father shifting uncomfortably, but remaining silent, complicit in his passive way. My mother nodded encouragingly, adding, "The Grand Plaza requires full payment 30 days before the event. How quickly can you transfer the funds?" I took a deep breath. How much are we talking about exactly? Tiffany and my mother exchanged glances before my mother replied, "Well, all of it, obviously. The account has what, about 250,000, the life insurance plus what you saved." I kept my expression neutral, though internally I was reeling at their expectation to claim my dead child's entire trust fund for a wedding. They didn't even attempt to disguise their entitlement with pretense about partial amounts or loans. That when I learned the wedding was already catastrophically over budget. Tiffany had selected a designer gown that cost as much as a small car. The venue had been upgraded twice. The honeymoon plans now included first-class airfare and a private villa. My parents, eager to impress Bradley's wealthy family, had agreed to expenses far beyond their means. While I prepared coffee in the kitchen, listening to them discuss wedding details as if everything were settled, I made 2 important phone calls. The first to Jason's lawyer confirming our meeting the following day. The second to my boss requesting an additional day of bereavement leave. Returning to the living room, I informed them that we would need to meet at the lawyer office tomorrow to handle the paperwork properly. They seemed pleased by my cooperation, mistaking my calm demeanor for submission. After years of giving in to keep the peace, they had no reason to expect anything different. As they prepared to leave, Tiffany hugged me awkwardly, the first physical contact since her arrival. "Thanks for understanding, sis. This means everything to me. I knew we could count on you." I simply nodded and showed them out, then spent the evening preparing for what would come next. 6 months before Jason's death, when his prognosis became increasingly grim, he had asked me a question that broke my heart. "Mom, what happens to the money in my college fund if I die?" I had tried to redirect the conversation, but Jason was persistent. "We both know I am really sick, Mom. The doctors look sad when they think I can't see them. I want to know what happens to my money." Recognizing his need for honesty, I explained that the trust fund would go to whatever purpose was legally designated. Usually that would be me as his parent. Jason thought about this carefully before responding, "I want to help other kids like me. Can we do that?" The next day, we met with a lawyer specializing in estate planning. Despite his young age, Jason was clear about his wishes. He wanted most of his trust to support pediatric cancer research and to help families struggling with medical bills. He insisted on setting aside a small portion for me to do something that makes you happy when you're ready. The lawyer helped us structure everything legally, including recording a video of Jason expressing his wishes. It was the most adult conversation I had ever had with my 9-year-old son. And though it destroyed me inside, I was enormously proud of his compassion and foresight. Now, the day after my family demands, we gathered in the lawyer conference room. My parents and Tiffany arrived dressed impeccably, bringing along Bradley to add pressure. They made small talk with the lawyer, clearly expecting this to be a simple matter of signing papers to release the funds. Mr. Daniels, the lawyer, began formally. Thank you all for coming. We are here to discuss the Jason Reynolds Trust Fund established by Camila Reynolds for her son Jason, who recently passed away. My mother nodded impatiently. Yes, and as his grandmother, I believe the family should have input on how these funds are distributed, now that the original purpose is moot. Mr. Daniels smiled politely. Actually, Mrs. Patterson, the trust has very specific directives in the event of Jason passing. Before his death, Jason worked with his mother to legally designate the funds. Confusion crossed their faces as Mr. Daniels continued. The Jason Reynolds Trust will be distributed as follows. 75% will go to the Children Memorial Hospital Pediatric Oncology Research Fund. 20% will establish a support foundation for single parents of children with cancer. The remaining 5% has been designated for Camila Reynolds' personal use as specifically requested by Jason. The room fell silent. My mother's face flushed red while Tiffany's jaw literally dropped open. Bradley stared at the floor, suddenly very interested in his designer shoes. This is ridiculous, my mother finally sputtered. He was a child. Children can't make legal decisions about money. Mr. Daniels remained calm. Normally, you would be correct. However, we took extraordinary steps to establish Jason's capacity to express his wishes given his age and circumstances. We have documentation from his doctors and the hospital ethics committee, along with a recorded statement from Jason himself. Would you like to see it? Without waiting for a response, he nodded to his assistant, who set up a laptop on the conference table. The screen came to life, showing Jason sitting in our living room about 5 months before. Though clearly ill, his eyes were bright and determined. Hi, I am Jason Reynolds. I am 9 years old, and I have leukemia. My doctors say I might not get better. I want to talk about my trust fund that my mom set up for me. He spoke clearly, explaining his wishes for the money to help other kids with cancer and their families. Then came the part that silenced the room completely. My grandparents and my aunt don't visit me much. They never came when I was in the hospital. They're busy with my aunt's wedding. That okay. But I don't want my money to go for parties or dresses. I wanted to help other kids like me have a chance to grow up. There was a painful pause before he continued, smiling slightly. I asked Mom to keep a little bit of the money to do something that makes her happy after I'm gone. She works so hard taking care of me. She deserves something good. The video ended. My father had tears in his eyes, the first genuine emotion I had seen from him in years. My mother and Tiffany sat rigid with shock and building rage. This is manipulation, my mother finally exploded. Camila clearly coached him to say these things. We are his family. That money should stay in the family. Mr. Daniels remained professional but firm. The trust documentation is legally binding, Mrs. Patterson. The funds are already in the process of being transferred to the designated recipients. The transaction cannot be reversed. Tiffany turned to me, her face contorted with fury. How could you do this to me? You've ruined everything. The wedding is in 3 months. I met her gaze steadily. I didn't do anything to you, Tiffany. Jason made his own decisions about his money. But we're family, she shrieked. Family is supposed to help each other. Something inside me finally broke free. Yes, family is supposed to help each other. Where was that family when Jason was dying? Where were you during his treatments, during his funeral? You were shopping for wedding dresses and having parties while I buried my son alone. The room fell silent at my outburst. Even Bradley looked uncomfortable. My mother recovered first, her voice icy. We've always known you were selfish, Camila, but using your dead child to punish us is beyond comprehension. Come on, Thomas. Tiffany, we're leaving. My father hesitated, glancing at me with what appeared to be a mix of shame and regret. For a moment, I thought he might actually speak up, but then he followed my mother and sister out the door, his shoulders slumped in defeat. After they left, Mr. Daniels gently patted my hand. Your son was an extraordinary young man, Mrs. Reynolds. What he has done will help many children and families." I nodded, too emotional to speak. In his final act, my 9-year-old son had shown more integrity, compassion, and courage than my adult family members ever had. As I walked out of the office into the bright afternoon, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time since Jason's death, I could breathe. He had not only given me permission to move forward, but had ensured I would do so unburdened by toxic family ties. In protecting his legacy, he had also protected me. 6 months after that day in the lawyer office, I stood in the newly dedicated Jason Reynolds Pediatric Oncology Wing at Children's Memorial Hospital. A plaque bearing his name and photo graced the entrance alongside a quote we had selected together. "Look up at the stars, not down at your feet." The months since Jason's death had been a journey through the darkest valley of grief, but I was slowly finding my way. I had not heard directly from my family since that day in the lawyer office. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that Tiffany wedding had been scaled down considerably. They had moved it from the Grand Plaza to a country club and reduced the guest list by half. I felt neither satisfaction nor regret at this news. It simply no longer mattered to me. With the small portion of the trust that Jason had insisted I keep for myself, I took a 6-month sabbatical from work. My boss, who had been supportive throughout Jason's illness, assured me my position would be waiting when I returned. During those months, I did something I had never done before. I put myself first. I spent the first month barely functioning, allowing myself to fully experience the grief I had been holding at bay. I saw a therapist twice weekly, learning that healing isn't linear, and that some days would still feel impossible even as others became manageable. When I felt strong enough, I began traveling to places Jason had wanted to visit. I took his favorite stuffed astronaut with me, photographing it at the Grand Canyon, the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, and on a whale watching tour in Alaska. It was both heartbreaking and healing, keeping my promise to show him the world, even if not in the way we had planned. Gradually, I found purpose in advocacy work for pediatric cancer families. The foundation established with Jason Trust was now providing emergency assistance to single parents struggling with their children's medical bills. I worked with the hospital to create a support network connecting parents in similar situations, ensuring no one had to face that journey alone as I had. On what would have been Jason's 10th birthday, I visited his grave with a small model rocket and a cupcake. I sang happy birthday, ignoring the strange looks from others in the cemetery. These small rituals helped me maintain my connection to him, while accepting that life continued. There were still difficult days. The first day of the school year he would never attend. Holidays. Random Tuesdays when grief ambushed me in the cereal aisle, because I automatically reached for his favorite brand. But increasingly, there were also good days. Days when I could remember Jason with smiles instead of just tears. A year after Jason's death, I ran into my mother at a department store. I was shopping for a dress for a fundraising gala for the foundation, when I turned a corner and suddenly faced her. She looked older, the lines around her mouth deeper than I remembered. "Camila," she said, clearly surprised. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied neutrally. "How are you?" She hesitated before answering. "Things have been difficult. Your father and I are having some financial problems. Bradley's parents backed out of helping with the wedding expenses at the last minute. We had to take out a second mortgage." I recognized the familiar pattern. No questions about my well-being, no mention of Jason, just her problems and the implicit suggestion that I should help solve them. "I am sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it. "Financial stress is difficult." She seemed encouraged by my sympathetic response. "Perhaps we could get coffee sometime, catch up." Looking at her, I felt no anger, just a profound sadness for what our relationship could have been. "I am not ready for that," I told her gently but firmly. "Maybe someday, but not now." Disappointment flashed across her face, followed by resignation. She nodded slightly before walking away. I watched her go, realizing that for the first time her disapproval no longer had power over me. In the following months, I returned to work full-time while maintaining my involvement with the foundation. I made new friends through support groups and volunteer work people who understood loss and valued authentic connections. I began dating again cautiously, a widowed father I met through the foundation, who understood that grief doesn't end but makes room for new experiences alongside it. Jason remains with me always. His photos still adorn my walls. I still talk to him sometimes when I am alone. But I have learned that honoring his memory means living fully myself. The profound lesson his short life taught me was that family isn't defined by blood, but by love, by showing up, by being present in both joy and sorrow. On the second anniversary of his passing, I started a new tradition. I wrote him a letter sharing everything that had happened that year, then attached it to a biodegradable balloon filled with wildflower seeds that would scatter when it eventually came down. As I released it into the evening sky, watching it rise toward the first emerging stars, I felt a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible. The trust fund that my parents and sister had coveted is now helping dozens of families and supporting research that might someday prevent other children from suffering as Jason did. His short life created ripples of compassion and change that continue to spread outward. What greater legacy could there be? If you have been through family betrayal during your darkest moments, know that healing is possible. Standing firm in your boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. Have you ever had to make difficult choices to protect yourself or honor someone's memory? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too can find strength after loss. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember to look up at the stars, not down at your feet, just as Jason would have wanted.